Morning, Mark.
I
What are we
think we're
talking
live.
about today?
Well, let's see. Let's make sure we get live
Make sure I'm
there.
not.
Let me look at the thing. The screen's kind of dark at the moment. There we are. Okay. Well, we're there. I don't know when it picked up, but we're certainly there now.
Yeah, this is a bit of the live thing's a bit of a wild ride, but yeah,
Yeah.
what are we talking about?
Stock status management. This is one of the many ways that your Workstand website and you can communicate with the shopping public. And
Yes.
it's important to have many ways because, people don't read. They're busy and focused on what they're doing. And sometimes they see labels and messages, and sometimes they don't. So, the more places we can be specific about what's going on in the shopping experience, the better.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, let's see. Let's start and show you what that looks like. Let me
Hmm.
get back over to my little screen. So we're talking about this availability label here. This is what people see based on the status of a product. So, for instance, this Scott Addict gravel bike
Hmm.
is in stock, which means we're looking at POS data that tells us that there is a brown and navy small size in stock in the store. Sometimes it's not in stock, sometimes it's at a warehouse. And so we
Hmm.
see that. And what we're going to look at today is how that gets set up and the order in which those things will appear and why. And let's get to it.
Yeah.
So, from the Workstand admin, we'll go to settings and commerce
Hmm.
and stock status.
Hmm.
Oh, this is a good opportunity to say, what if you don't want to do that? You could say stock status up here in this wonderful search bar, and you
Hmm.
get stock status management, and it'll take me right to that same spot.
Very nice.
So, first of all, it needs to be active, which it should be on most every site these
Hmm.
days. And here's how this works. If the quantity, and this is, we're looking at point of sale data from the store, and we're looking at warehouse data from whichever warehouses have been enabled, subject to whatever exclusion settings. I will refer you a few days back to the supplier sync setting to look at exclusion settings. So, subject to all that, if we look in the POS data and we see that the quantity on hand is greater than zero, means you have at least one in stock, then in this situation, we're going to always show that variation. So if you have a red one in stock, we're going to show it. You can't opt out of that, but you can opt out of the whether it can be purchased or not. So certainly, if something's in stock, we want people to be able to purchase it, and it's going to show up with that label in stock, just like this guy does right here. And then if it's not in stock, but it is in a warehouse, then we skip down to the bottom and we use this supplier sync override function. And same kind of thing, we're going to show that variation that's in the warehouse. And in this case, it can be purchased. And I think it makes 100% sense to let people purchase it. And it's going to
Hmm.
have this label that says in the warehouse. And that's what this guy's doing right here. If, though, it is not in stock and it is not in the warehouse, but we see the quantity on hand is it's mapped to the POS, you just don't have any, then in this situation, it's not going to show that variation, but you certainly could show it.
Hmm.
And you could or let people buy it or not. This can be purchased function. So if it says show variation there, it's going to say out of stock. Now maybe you don't want to show your out of stock products. It's out of stock. You don't have it. The warehouse doesn't have it. Where are you going to get it? But a lot of people, especially sales oriented people, want the opportunity because maybe you can get it. Just it's just not available through one of the supplier sync partners,
Mm.
or maybe you just happen to know that you can get some from somewhere. Maybe you have another location friend that has a store, and you know you can get whatever the reason. You might want to let people see that.
Hmm.
But if it doesn't meet that one, but it says the quantity on hand is less than zero, but the quantity on order is greater than zero, this is a purchase order. So this means it's sitting on a purchase order in your point of sale system. We can see that. It's going to display that variation and it's going to say back ordered. So in this spot where it says in stock, it would then say back ordered or whatever you want to put in that spot. And in this case, they wouldn't be able to buy it. They'd just be able to see it. But maybe if it's on a purchase order, you know you're getting it, turn it on, let them buy it. But just know that you need to be sure you can get it because the expectation is that they're about to buy that thing.
Hmm.
If it's not in stock, it's not in the warehouse, it's not out of stock, it's not on a purchase order, then these last two come into play. So sometimes there's multiple variations of an item, and some of them are mapped. In other words, they're connected to our system. The POS and the library are connected, and sometimes um, some of those variations aren't mapped. So if other variations are mapped, then this is what happens. It just says call for availability. So this might be that you there's a bunch of variations of an item and you map some of them, but you never order the other ones. Maybe there's just some weird color you don't like and you never order it, so you never map those.
Mhm.
It's still going to show all those variations and say call for availability. If you of course tell it to show the variation.
Yeah.
This may be a little dangerous
Mhm.
to let people purchase just because you don't know if you can get it. But that's again your decision. And then this last one is when just none of the variations are mapped. So on the pro level account, you can manually go into our product library and manually import an item. None of the variations will be mapped. We don't know if you have it or not. But if you want to, you can do that and show that this is really good to use when maybe there's a niche brand that we have product data for, but we're not connected to supplier sync for.
Mm.
And you want your customers to know you can get those things for them, but they're not going to be mapped because you don't stock them. So this is a good way to use that. Again,
Nice.
whether you let people buy that thing is up to you, but certainly it's okay to show that for sure. And maybe you say call for availability. Maybe you like limited availability. Maybe you like to
Mm.
be more creative. Again, not everybody reads labels, so play with what works in your market. I like at warehouse.
Mhm.
I like in store versus in stock. So whatever your particular opinion is, this is where you can do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and we have that all outlined in the help center. Even with some of those availability labels, kind of like best practices or some things that we would, highly suggest. Um, are these some settings that typically people like kind of set and forget, or are people adjusting these at any time?
I think most people tend to set them and forget them.
Okay.
But it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. I think that it really is true that people in the midst of shopping don't read very often. And so if you think of something that you think means something more, which is actually why we came up with at warehouse. They used to say in warehouse, and consumers would think, "Oh, that's fine. Just go out back to the warehouse and get it." And
Mm-hmm.
they didn't realize, it's an off-site warehouse. So some people will say off-site warehouse. I think that goes too far. I think that will push people away. But some people are pretty hands-on about playing with the different messaging to try and get it across of what's going on. So, for instance, back order is one I think gets played with a lot. Some people will say back ordered coming soon, or maybe just coming soon.
Hmm.
I think the limited availability thing is good rather than call because, frankly, these days people are less likely to pick the phone up and call than they are just to hit the back button on their browser and go find another source. So, limited availability creates a sense of urgency, where call for availability creates an obligation to pick the phone up and call. So, I like that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. But that's a good question. And generally, I think most people set them and forget them, but I don't think it has to be that way. And I encourage people to play with it to find what really works in their market.
Cool.
There are other settings down here. I'm going to run through them quickly, but I think they could just about have their own daily episode. Closeout items, and in our system, we treat a sale price and a closeout price differently by default. So this is checked by default, and the difference is if you check it as a closeout, the website will only show the variations that you have in stock. So it's going to ignore all these statuses,
Hmm.
and it's going to ignore the warehouse. And so if something's on closeout, that means you're selling the last couple you have and you don't want any more and you don't want people asking you about the ones you don't have. The display fulfillment choices, this just puts the shipping methods or the delivery methods on the item detail page. So they see it a step before getting into the cart. And so that can be helpful for people that want to know all their options before they actually get into the shopping cart.
Hmm.
And then decrement inventory. Oh, refine. Where'd the other one? Oh, refined by availability. That's the I'll show you what that is. That's do 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 do. Let's back up a notch. This is this part. So do you want people to be able to say only show me the parts that are in stock versus not
Mm,
doing that and seeing everything, including what's in the warehouse.
I like that.
I do too. I like that a lot. Then the decrement inventory quantity on hand. This is as soon as something sells on the website knows the quantity. So if somebody buys two of something, it will decrement the quantity of that item in the website inventory area by two if they bought two. That way, since there's a bit of a lag
Mm,
between that action happening and a sale getting exported to the POS and that ex- updated data coming back, that kind of narrows the gap of how long there might be an oversell opportunity.
nice.
And then this is just another place to add messaging for out of stock stuff that shows up in a different place besides that label. So if you're not, like in this case, this wasn't set to display, don't show the out of stock. This still gives that out of stock message on, I think it shows up. Let's see. It would show up right here.
Mm,
I think that's where it shows up. But anyway, it's another place to put a message on items that might show up that you don't want to show up. But generally,
excellent.
one or the other is good. And I think that's about it.
Cool.
So, stock status management, really good place to communicate. Not something you have to look at all the time, but it's worth
Mhm.
looking at if you get a lot of people in the store buying something and walking in 10 minutes later thinking they're going to pick it up.
Yeah, and I encourage folks, I think this is, I mean, now to do a good review of this, a little bit of maintenance. I I believe that I think during the wildness of COVID, a lot of folks were altering some of these settings.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I think maybe just a double check to make sure that you're in line with kind of best practices and what kind of what I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah. And that's a good point. So, a lot of people, this was safe to do when inventory was plentiful. If it's on a purchase order, it's back ordered, no big deal. I can let people buy it. I'm going to have it in a few days.
Mhm.
During COVID, when inventory was almost non-existent, that was a dangerous thing. You may never get that thing, and so a lot of people turned that off. We also did. See if I can find this real quick. Doo-doo. We also did. This is another demo site with a lovely premium theme on top of it.
Mhm.
But we did this piece here. So instead of
Mm,
letting people buy those items, we came up with this little project that says, look, that's back ordered. I'm not going to let you purchase it. Instead of an add to cart button, I'm going to have a notify me when available button. And it
mhm.
does this form and it automatically includes what the thing is. And this way, people could collect interest on things without taking their money and not knowing if they could ever get it. So this is an extra project. I think we charged $250 to set this up on the site. It's not as relevant anymore, again, because there's plenty of inventory.
Mhm.
But just know there are options. Sometimes there's options within the tool set that are just part of it, like these things. And sometimes there's options with a small custom project to make the tools do something different than we originally intended.
Yeah,
Good. Okay.
cool. Well, thanks for all the knowledge, Mark.
That was fun. Good to run through one of my favorite parts. I like stock status. I like rules, believe it or not. I like rules and processes.
Wow. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I guess maybe we'll go through some of the rules and processes on Monday. Processes? Processes.
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 Okay.
We'll see you then.
See you then.